Can hormonal or metabolic issues make it harder to lose weight? Hormones are the main messengers in the pathways that control our weight and metabolism. So any condition that alters these hormones is going to affect whether we gain or lose weight. The thyroid hormones stimulate metabolic activity. Insufficient thyroid hormone, known as hypothyroidism, will cause metabolism to slow down, increasing the tendency to gain weight and making it harder to lose weight. This can be treated very effectively by hormone replacement. Cushing's disease is due to a sustained overproduction of cortisol, the stress hormone. This boosts appetite and promotes fat storage, especially on the trunk and face, and there is considerable muscle loss. Similar symptoms can occur after long-term steroid therapy, and treatment will depend on the cause. Weight loss will be difficult until these conditions are adequately treated. The sex hormones can also affect weight. Testosterone levels start to decline in men and women around the age of 30 years. Low testosterone levels are associated with weight gain and with a loss of muscle. In women, estrogen tends to reduce appetite, but it boosts fat storage, mainly around the hips and thighs rather than in the abdomen. Progesterone, on the other hand, favours fat metabolism, but it can stimulate appetite. So the overall effect depends on the balance between the two hormones. The decrease in estrogen and progesterone at the menopause is often associated with some weight gain, and this is typically on the belly rather than around the hips and thighs due to the reduced estrogen effect. Although hormone replacement therapy will lessen these changes, HRT will not be continued forever, and it's just as well to be aware of how weight can vary so that you can take steps if necessary. Polycystic ovaries syndrome is the commonest cause of infertility in women, and it has a bidirectional relationship with weight gain, in that this syndrome predisposes to weight gain, just as weight gain can trigger the syndrome. The common factor is insulin resistance, which must be resolved as the initial step in the treatment of the condition. This is best achieved by weight loss and a healthy diet, preferably one low in carbohydrates, especially in refined carbs, to reduce the stimulus for insulin secretion. The metabolic disturbances we most commonly meet in weight management clinics are, of course, those related to diet, lifestyle and obesity, the main ones being metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance, which is closely linked to a poor diet, weight gain and chronic inflammation, has a pivotal role in both of these conditions. Insulin is widely known as the hormone that controls the levels of sugar in the blood. However, it has many other actions, including boosting fat storage. Insulin resistance leads to the secretion of ever larger amounts of the hormone, increasing the tendency to store fat and making it harder to lose weight. To break this cycle, we need to reduce the drivers of insulin resistance, which are chronic inflammation and a poor diet, especially one rich in refined carbohydrates and unhealthy fats. Low-fat ketogenic diets are ideal in this situation as they are low in carbs and fats and reduce inflammation. How does stress affect my ability to lose weight? When we talk about stress, we must differentiate between the short-term or acute stress that helps us deal with a difficult situation or emergency, and chronic stress that persists over prolonged periods of weeks or months or even years. Acute stress prepares us to respond to situations that could threaten our well-being or even our life, the so-called fight or flight response. This short-term stress cuts appetite so we aren't distracted by hunger, and it boosts our metabolic rate, putting us in an optimal situation to survive an emergency. But when that stress becomes persistent, the effects change, with increased appetite and increased fat storage, especially of belly fat. This type of fat is called visceral fat and is linked to metabolic disease that will further increase the tendency to store fat, leading to that vicious circle of the more you eat, the more you want to eat. Chronic stress is often associated with long-term anxiety, a known driver of emotional eating, particularly of comfort foods that are high in calories. It can also disrupt sleep, which is yet another driver of weight gain. And to cap it off, weight loss itself is stressful. If you see yourself in this situation, weight loss is going to be more difficult whatever method you use. And when weight loss is achieved, it's very likely to be regained afterwards if the stress environment hasn't been resolved. So when a weight loss method is started, it's essential to combine it with supportive measures to reduce stress as much as possible. I realise that is very easy to say, but I'm afraid that doesn't make it any less necessary if you're going to be successful in the long term. What are the health risks of being overweight or obese? Overweight and obesity affect both physical and mental health and well-being. Not only is depression more common in obesity, but social stigma, workplace discrimination and social isolation are still experienced by people living with obesity due to a widespread lack of understanding about the complexity of the disease and misconceptions often perpetuated by societal beliefs, the media, and sadly, even some health professionals. Many of the physical health risks of overweight and obesity are well known. They include joint problems, particularly affecting the back and the knees, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Other weight-related conditions are often less well known. Increased fat in the neck area can narrow the airways. Fat also infiltrates the tongue, increasing its size. When asleep, especially if lying on your back, these two factors act together to increase the risk of sleep apnea, which is when the tongue falls back and blocks the airway while you are asleep. Sleeping on your side, propped up by a pillow, will reduce the likelihood of this happening. Sleep apnea leads to daytime fatigue, difficulty concentrating and irritability. It also has health risks as it increases blood pressure and the risk of heart disease, stroke and metabolic diseases such as type 2 diabetes. Fatty liver disease, which is due to a build-up of fat in the liver, causing a deterioration in liver function. If allowed to progress, this can lead to very serious liver disease. Gallstones are more common in obesity. They can develop during weight gain or weight loss, and measures must be taken during weight loss programs to reduce the risk. Chronic inflammation triggered by diet and obesity is the main factor linking obesity with many weight-related chronic diseases. This type of inflammation arises primarily in the gut and fat tissue, especially in the fat located in the abdomen, which we call visceral fat. Weight loss will reduce inflammation simply by reducing the volume of fat, especially of the visceral fat, but diet type and quality are also hugely important. Ketosis is itself an anti-inflammatory state, and ketogenic diets also oblige us to reduce our intake of pro-inflammatory sugars, creating an excellent two-pronged approach to reducing the risk of chronic disease. And using a wide variety of quality foods will help to reduce gut wall inflammation directly and through an improved gut microbiome. Likewise, exercise is very important, not just for its effects on weight loss, but because it helps to restore muscle health, which is also affected by inflammation. How is medical weight loss different from regular dieting? In what we might call regular dieting, you reduce your calorie intake simply by reducing your food intake, mostly by trying to reduce foods with more fat and carbs. It'll depend on what you've read in books or on the internet, what you've heard from people you trust, or perhaps just your personal preference, whether you try to cut back more on fat or carbs or both. This approach doesn't take into account the medical conditions that could affect the efficacy or safety of a diet, and often does not ensure an adequate intake of essential nutrients, including protein, minerals and vitamins, to cover the needs of body functions and muscle health. When there is a small amount of weight to lose in an individual who is otherwise well, these issues are unlikely to be a problem. The situation is different when there is a significant amount of weight to lose, especially for individuals with health issues and perhaps taking medication. Medically supervised weight loss programs are designed with multidisciplinary teams experienced in the treatment of overweight and obesity and of their psychological, metabolic and health issues. The aim is to develop a personalized, holistic treatment that will work on the root causes of obesity and will take into account any health, medication or other issues that might affect the efficacy or safety of the program. We don't want to see a diet exacerbate a disease or interfere with its treatment. And likewise, the treatment of some diseases needs to be optimized if it's not going to interfere with weight loss. Why am I struggling to lose weight, even with diet and exercise? Many people come to me because they're finding it difficult to lose weight. And let's face it, it is difficult to lose weight. Even if you're otherwise healthy, everything seems to be working against you, starting with biology. As a species, we evolved in times when food scarcity and famine were common, so individuals with genes that favoured fat storage, the so-called thrifty genes, were more likely to survive and pass on those genes. Almost all of us still have that same genetic makeup. But now, in this environment of 24/7 food availability and ever less need to move to get that food, the drive to store up energy can be counterproductive, as it not only sets the scene for progressive weight gain, but will resist weight loss. And this is really felt when you voluntarily cut back on food intake and start to lose weight. Appetite and hunger increase, particularly for foods with a higher energy content, meaning those with more fat and sugar, and physical activity decreases to save energy. But that's only a part of the story, as there's a whole world out there that influences what we do. Our environment has a huge impact on what we eat and how much we move. It's not just the uninterrupted availability of hyper-palatable, ultra-processed foods in bright wrappers, but our social and professional environments actively encourage us to eat and drink more than we might really want. And we move ever less, as we can get pretty much anything online and have transport to take us everywhere, sometimes even just to go upstairs. Added to that, we have the stresses of daily life at home and at work, and a lack of sleep, all of which push up stress hormone levels and drive us to eat more. So without a clear diet and lifestyle plan that takes these factors into account and compensates for them in some way, it can be really difficult just to stay weight stable, let alone lose weight. You also need to be aware that certain health conditions and treatments can affect your appetite, your tendency to store fat, and how much you move. Mobility issues, depression, hormonal conditions such as hypothyroidism, polycystic ovaries syndrome and type 2 diabetes, and a number of other illnesses make us susceptible to weight gain. And several widely used medicines, including insulin and some antidepressants, can provoke weight gain. So if you're finding it difficult to lose weight, it's very likely that there is an explanation. It's essential to speak to a doctor and to a nutrition specialist, as you may benefit from a review of possible medical issues and of any medication you may be taking, as well as looking at lifestyle circumstances, sources of stress, and the type of diet you're eating. Effective weight loss methods include behavioural and dietary adjustments, specialist diets, drugs, and even surgery. And the ideal method for any particular person is going to depend on their individual background, preferences, and causes of weight gain.